Marry me, Chloe, and together we will burn my mother's world to the ground." The words hung in the air of my tiny, rented room. They were so outrageous, so impossible, that for a second I thought I was imagining them. But the man sitting across from me, Caspin Valerius, looked completely serious. His eyes were the color of ice, and they held no warmth at all, only a sharp, burning intensity. He was nothing like his brother. Where Adrian was all soft smiles and easy charm, Caspian was forged from steel and fury. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But sometimes, you find an ally who helps you set the whole table on fire. And Caspian Valerius was holding a torch. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. How has your week been? It's raining outside my window right now, a steady downpour that feels pretty fitting for the story I'm about to tell you. Let me know what you're all up to in the comments. My name is Chloe Brown, and this is the story of how losing everything led me to a man who offered me the world, just so we could destroy one person in it, his mother. The man who just asked me to marry him is the estranged billionaire son of the woman who took my husband, my health, and my dignity. He found me at my lowest point, and he was offering me a way up, a way out, a way to get even. But it sounds insane, I know. Before he walked into my life with his shocking proposal, someone else had walked out, leaving me in pieces. 2 years ago, I was 25 and married to Adrian Valerius. I loved him with everything I had. I came from a simple background, and marrying into the wealthy and powerful Valerius family was intimidating. I always felt like I had to prove myself, prove that I wasn't after their money. I worked hard to be the perfect wife, the perfect daughter-in-law. Their world was one of quiet luxury and unspoken rules, and I was always afraid of making a mistake, of revealing that I didn't truly belong. His mother, Elara, was the queen of that world. She was always polite to me, smiling and calling me darling. But there was a distance I could never seem to cross. She would compliment my cooking, but then mention how their old chef used to make the dish. She would admire a dress I wore, but suggest a different color would be more appropriate. They were tiny little cuts, so small you could almost convince yourself you were imagining them. One day, for our first anniversary, she gave me a gift. It was a beautiful silver bracelet. I was so touched, I nearly cried. "It's a family heirloom," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Well, a copy. The real one is passed down, of course. But I had this made just for you." A copy. The words stung, but I pushed the feeling down. I thanked her and wore the bracelet every day. I told myself it was a kind gesture. I told myself I was being too sensitive. I wanted to be part of her family so badly that I was willing to accept the imitation version of it she was offering me. Then Elara got sick. Her liver was failing, and the diagnosis was grim. The doctor struggled to find a donor match because of her rare blood type. The entire family was consumed by a quiet panic. Adrian was falling apart, and my heart ached for him. My desire to prove myself, to finally secure my place in the family, became an overwhelming need. I had to do something. I got tested. It was a long shot, but it was the only thing I could think of to do. When the results came back, it was a miracle. I was a compatible donor. The relief was so powerful it brought me to my knees. This was it. This was my chance to finally, truly become one of them. A sacrifice like this? Giving a piece of myself, literally? They would have to see me then. They would have to accept me. Adrian was ecstatic. He called me his hero. Elara wept and held my hand, telling me I was saving her life. For the first time, the distance between us seemed to vanish. All the little cuts, all the moments of doubt, they all faded away. We were a family, united against this terrible illness, and I was the one who could fix it. The surgery was complex and grueling. It took hours. I woke up in the recovery room feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. A thick line of stitches burned across my abdomen. Pain was a constant, throbbing presence. But my first thought wasn't about myself. It was about Elara. I asked the nurse if the surgery was a success, if she was okay. The nurse gave me a warm smile. The transplant was a complete success. Mrs. Valerius is in recovery and doing very well. I cried with relief. It was worth it. All the pain was worth it. The next few days were a blur of pain medication and restless sleep. Adrian visited, but he was different. He seemed distracted, distant. He'd hold my hand, but his touch felt cool. He'd ask how I was feeling, but his eyes were already looking toward the door. I told myself he was just stressed, worried about his mother. I told myself things would go back to normal soon. On the third day, he came into my room. He wasn't carrying flowers or a magazine. He was carrying a slim leather folder. He didn't smile. "Chloe," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any emotion. "My mother's going to make a full recovery. The doctors are very pleased." "That's amazing news," I whispered, trying to sit up, but the pain made me gasp. He didn't move to help me. He just stood at the foot of my bed. "Yes, it is. She has her health back. We have what we needed." "We?" I asked, confused. "Thank you for the liver," he said, as if he were thanking a stranger for holding a door open. "It was a generous gift. Now, here's a gift for you." He opened the folder and slid a stack of papers onto my bedside table, right next to my cup of water. I stared at the top page. The bold letters seemed to scream at me. Petition for dissolution of marriage. I looked up at him, my mind unable to process what I was seeing. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Adrian, what is this?" "It's your freedom," he said coldly, his face a perfect mask of indifference. "We don't need you anymore. Sign this. Our lawyers will be in touch." And then he turned around and walked out of my hospital room, leaving me alone with the fresh, brutal scar on my body and the divorce papers that ripped my entire world apart. The silence he left behind was louder than any sound I'd ever heard. I stared at the door he'd closed so quietly, so finally. My hand trembled as I reached for the papers. The sterile, official language felt like a slap in the face. Dissolution. Irreconcilable differences. Spousal support waived. It was all there, neat and tidy. My entire life, my entire heart, dismissed in a few typed pages. A transaction, just like the liver. A nurse bustled in a few minutes later, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor. "Time to check your vitals, sweetie." She smiled, but it faltered when she saw my face. She saw the papers on the table. Her eyes softened with a pity that made my stomach clench. "Oh, honey, what happened?" I couldn't answer. I couldn't form the words. The man I loved, the man whose mother I had just saved, had just thrown me away like garbage. How do you explain that to a stranger when you can't even understand it yourself? My mind spun backward, desperately trying to find the point where it all went wrong. It had to be a mistake. A horrible, cruel misunderstanding. Because the Adrian who left this room wasn't my Adrian. My Adrian was the one who found me working at a small art gallery, trying to make enough money to pay for my community college classes. He'd come in to look at a painting and ended up looking only at me. He was charming and funny, and he didn't seem to care that I wore clothes from a thrift store or that my apartment was the size of his closet. He said he loved my spirit, my passion for art, the way I saw the world. We fell in love so fast and so hard it felt like the only real thing in the world. We got married a year later. A small ceremony at the courthouse, because that's what I wanted. He agreed, even though I knew Elara wanted a grand affair to show off to her friends. "It's about us, Chloe," he'd whispered to me during our first dance in our tiny living room. "Just you and me. Always." I believed him. I held on to those words like a lifeline, especially when we moved into the guest house on his family's massive estate. He said it was temporary, just until we found our own place. But days turned into months, and I felt Elara's presence everywhere. Her perfectly manicured gardens, the quiet staff who reported everything to her, her constant, polite suggestions that felt more like commands. "Chloe, darling," she'd said to me one afternoon over tea. We were sitting on her patio, overlooking a lawn that looked like a green carpet. "A family is like a body. Each part has a role. Sometimes, one part has to make a great sacrifice for the health of the whole. That is the highest form of love." At the time, I thought she was just being philosophical. I nodded, eager to agree, to show her I understood. I wanted so badly to be a functional part of that body, not a foreign object it might reject. Now, sitting in that hospital bed, her words echoed in my mind with a chilling new meaning. I was a part, all right, a spare part, one they could take what they needed from and then throw away. The sickness came suddenly. Elara collapsed at a family dinner. The diagnosis felt like a death sentence. We were all in a fog of fear. Adrian was a wreck. He paced the halls of the hospital, his face pale and drawn. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't sleep. I held him while he cried, promising him we'd get through it, that I would do anything to help. Anything. That one word would come to define my downfall. I was the one who brought up donation. I want to get tested, I told him one night. We were in our bedroom in the guest house, the lights off. He turned to me, his eyes wide in the dark.
Chloe, no.
I could never ask you to do that. The surgery is dangerous. You're not asking, I said, my voice firm with a certainty I didn't know I possessed. I'm offering. She's your mother, Adrian. She's my family now, too. The way he looked at me in that moment, it was pure adoration. He pulled me into his arms and buried his face in my hair. You're too good for this world. You're an angel. You are saving me. Do you know that? When the call came that I was a match, it felt like destiny. Like this was the reason I had come into their lives. The fear of the surgery was nothing compared to the overwhelming feeling that I was finally, truly cementing my place. I was giving them the one thing their money couldn't buy. My worth would be undeniable. Elara cried when we told her. She was propped up on pillows in her hospital bed, looking frail and small. She took my hands in hers, her skin thin and cool. My dear girl, she'd whispered, her voice weak. There are no words. You are giving me life. You are a true daughter to me now. A true daughter. The words I had longed to hear for 2 years. All my insecurities, all my feelings of being an outsider, they just melted away in the warmth of her gratitude. I felt like I finally belonged. The night before the surgery, Adrian stayed with me in my private hospital room. He refused to leave my side. He held my hand and we talked for hours, our voices low in the quiet room. I've been thinking, he said, his voice soft. After this is all over and you're recovered, let's move. Let's get our own place, far away from here. Just us. My heart soared. It was everything I'd ever secretly wanted. To have him to myself, away from his mother's suffocating influence. Really? Really, he confirmed, leaning in to kiss my forehead. His lips were warm. We'll travel. I'll take you to see the real paintings in Italy, not just the pictures in your books. We'll have kids. A boy with your beautiful eyes and a girl with your stubbornness. I laughed, tears stinging my eyes. I'm not that stubborn. You are, he said, smiling. And I love it. I love you, Chloe. More than anything in this world. Thank you for doing this. You're my hero. He fell asleep in the chair next to my bed, his head resting on the edge of the mattress, still holding my hand. I stayed awake for a long time, just watching him sleep, my heart so full of love it felt like it would burst. I wasn't scared anymore. I was stepping into the future we had just planned, a future I had earned with my own body. A sharp beep from the heart monitor next to me jolted me back to the present. The room was cold. The hand that had held mine so tightly was gone. My hero. The words were ash in my mouth. The nurse came back over, her expression gentle. The doctor will be in soon to talk to you. Do you need anything? Some water? Anything for the pain. I looked at the divorce papers. Then I looked at her. The pain wasn't just the burning fire across my stomach. It was a different kind of pain, a deeper one. It was the agony of realizing that every loving word, every tender touch, every shared dream from the past 2 years was probably a lie. He didn't love me. He needed me. Elara didn't see me as a daughter. She saw me as a donor. A walking, talking organ bank with a convenient marriage certificate attached. They had played their parts perfectly, luring me in with the promise of love and acceptance, all to get what they wanted. And once the transaction was complete, the performance was over. No, I whispered, my voice hoarse. There's nothing you can give me for this kind of pain. The kindness in her eyes was almost unbearable. It was real, and it was a stark reminder that the affection I had craved from my new family had been completely fake. I turned my head to face the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The whole world felt gray and washed out. I had given a piece of myself to save a woman's life, and in return, my husband and my mother-in-law had carved out my heart and left me to bleed. The shock was finally starting to wear off, replaced by a cold, heavy certainty. I had been used. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a plan. And I had walked right into it, so blinded by love and my own desperate need to belong that I never saw the trap until it was too late. I was a fool. A complete and utter fool. And they had taken everything from me. The days after I left the hospital were a special kind of hell. Adrian's lawyers were ruthlessly efficient. They sent a courier to my hospital room with a final divorce decree and a check. A check that felt like blood money. It wasn't generous. It was just enough to be an insult, to say, "Here is what your body part was worth to us. Now go away." The nurse who had been so kind to me looked at the amount on the check, and her face hardened. "That's it," she'd whispered, shaking her head. "After what you did?" I was still in a fog of pain, both from the surgery and the shock. I had to move out of the guest house immediately. I was given less than 24 hours to pack my things. 2 years of my life had to fit into 2 suitcases and a few cardboard boxes. When I arrived, a grim-faced security guard I'd known for years wouldn't even look me in the eye as he stood watch, making sure I didn't take anything that wasn't explicitly mine. I saw one of Elara's housekeepers packing my clothes. She was putting the silver bracelet, the copy of the heirloom, into a box. I told her to throw it away. I never wanted to see it again. My friends were shocked, but they didn't know what to do. The Valerius name was a fortress, and I was on the outside with no way to attack it. My own family was back home, struggling with their own problems. I couldn't bear to tell them the full, humiliating truth. I just said Adrian and I had grown apart. The lie tasted like poison, but it was better than admitting I'd been treated like a used car part. So I found myself alone in a city that suddenly felt huge and hostile. I used the blood money to rent a small, depressing room in a building that smelled like damp carpet and old cooking. My days were empty. I'd lie in bed, my hand resting on the raised, angry scar across my stomach. It ached constantly, a physical reminder of my stupidity. Some days, the grief was so heavy I couldn't get up. Other days, it was a hot, burning rage that made me want to scream until my throat was raw. I was trapped in a loop of pain and shame. I tried to find work, but I was still weak from the surgery. I got a job answering phones at a small office, but I was so tired all the time, so distracted by the fire in my head, that I made too many mistakes, and they let me go after a week. I was running out of money. I was running out of hope. I was at the bottom of a pit so deep I couldn't see the sky anymore. That's where he found me. There was a knock on my door one evening. It wasn't the landlord looking for rent. It was a sharp, confident sound. I opened it a few inches, expecting to see a delivery person at the wrong address. But it was him. Caspin Valerius. I had only seen him in pictures. The black sheep of the family. The son who had been pushed out of their pharmaceutical empire years ago and had gone on to build his own. He was taller than I expected, dressed in a perfectly tailored dark suit that made my tiny, peeling doorway look even more pathetic. He looked nothing like Adrian. His jaw was sharper, his shoulders broader, and his eyes, they were a pale, piercing blue that seemed to see right through me. They held a coldness that I recognized because I was starting to feel it in myself. "Chloe Brown," he asked. His voice was deep and steady, with a faint accent I couldn't place. I just nodded, my hand tightening on the doorknob. What could he possibly want? "My name is Caspin Valerius," he said, as if I didn't already know. "May I come in?" I shouldn't have let him in. He was one of them. But I was too stunned, too curious, to say no. I stepped back and he walked into my small room. He took it all in with a single glance, the sagging mattress on the floor, the single cardboard box I used as a nightstand, the window that looked out onto a brick wall. He didn't show pity or disgust. He just looked analytical. like he was confirming something he already knew. He turned to face me. "My mother has made a full recovery," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And my brother has left you with next to nothing, I assume." I crossed my arms over my stomach, a useless attempt to hide the scar, to hide my shame. "What do you want?" He didn't waste any time. He got right to the point. "I want to offer you a partnership. A chance to take back everything they stole from you and more." He paused, his eyes locking onto mine. "Marry me, Chloe, and together, we will burn my mother's world to the ground." I stared at him. The words were so insane, so dramatic, I almost laughed. But he wasn't smiling. "You're crazy," I said. "Am I?" he asked, his voice calm. "My mother is a monster who uses people like pawns. She used you for your health. She used my brother for his obedience. And years ago, she used a clause in my father's will to push me out of Valerius Pharma, the company I helped build, because I wouldn't follow her orders. She took my legacy. You and I, we have a common enemy." He saw the disbelief on my face. He knew I was thinking he was just another Valerius, another liar. He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out a thin tablet. He swiped the screen and handed it to me. "You think this was all just a terrible coincidence?" he asked. "That my mother just happened to get sick and you just happened to be a perfect match?" I looked at the screen. It was an email thread. The sender was Elara Valerius. The recipient was a private investigator. The dates were from 6 months before her diagnosis was ever made public. She had commissioned a full background check on me. My health records, my blood type, my family's medical history. It was all there. She knew. She knew I was a potential match long before she ever got sick. My breath caught in my throat. I scrolled down. There was another email, this one from Elara to Adrian, sent just a month before the transplant. It was short and cold. "The asset is secured. Her emotional attachment is total. Proceed with the final phase as planned. Do not fail me in this." The asset. That was me. A wave of nausea washed over me. The room started to spin. All of it. The sudden warmth from Elara, Adrian's talk of a future together, his hero worship, it was all a script. A phase. A carefully constructed lie to get me on that operating table. My love for him wasn't real to them. I wasn't real. I was just an asset. I sank down onto the edge of my mattress, the tablet clattering to the floor. The coldness inside me was turning into ice. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was a conspiracy. They had plotted this. They had targeted me from the very beginning. Caspian picked up the tablet and turned it off. He knelt in front of me, so we were at eye level. His expression wasn't soft, but it was steady. It was focused. "She underestimated you," he said, his voice low and intense. "She saw you as a soft-hearted, simple girl she could manipulate and discard. She never imagined you could be a threat. But with me, with my resources and your story, you become the one thing she fears, a scandal she can't control. Your testimony, as my wife, would be devastating to her reputation. It would give the board of directors the reason they need to push her out. She loses the company. She loses her power. She loses everything." I looked into his eyes. They were burning with a cold fire, an anger that had been simmering for years. It was an anger I was just beginning to understand. "Why should I trust you?" I whispered. "You're her son, and that is exactly why you can trust me," he said. "Because no one on this earth hates her more than I do. I don't want your heart, Chloe. I don't want your love. I want your revenge. It's a business transaction. You help me destroy her, and I will make you so rich and powerful that you will never be a victim again. I will give you the tools to ruin Adrian's life as thoroughly as he ruined yours. You will have your justice. All you have to do is say yes." He was offering me a deal with the devil, a marriage based on hatred. But what was my alternative? To fade away in this miserable room? To let them get away with it? To let them win? The memory of Adrian's cold face in the hospital, of Elara's fake tears, of the word asset, On that screen, it all solidified into a single, hard point of resolve in my chest. My grief was gone.
My sadness was gone.
All that was left was rage. A pure, clean, clarifying rage. I looked at this dangerous stranger, this enemy of my enemy, and I saw not a liar, but a weapon.
And he was offering to share it with me.
I took a deep breath, the first one that didn't feel like it was tearing my stitches. I pushed myself up, standing tall. My decision was made. There was no going back. I had been a part of a body, a part they had used and discarded. Now, I would become a poison in their veins. Okay, I said, my voice clear and strong for the first time in weeks. I'll marry you. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Caspian's face. It didn't reach his eyes, but it didn't need to. It was a smile that promised retribution. Good, he said, standing up. He held out his hand. Welcome to the war, Chloe. I placed my hand in his. His grip was firm and cool. It wasn't a promise of love or comfort.
It was a contract.
An alliance forged in the ashes of our old lives. And in that moment, I knew I had just traded one prison for another, but this time, I would be the one holding the keys. The moment our hands parted, the world shifted into high gear. There was no time for second thoughts, no room for the fear that was clawing at the edges of my mind. Caspian operated with a speed and efficiency that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Within the hour, a sleek black car was waiting for us outside my building. I walked away from that miserable room with nothing but the clothes on my back and a small bag containing my wallet and phone. Caspian had looked at my 2 cardboard boxes of belongings with a dismissive glance. We'll buy you new things, he'd said. It wasn't a kind offer. It was a command. The old Chloe, the one who cherished thrift store finds and sentimental objects, was being erased. His home wasn't a warm, inviting mansion like Elara's. It was a fortress of glass and dark stone built into the side of a cliff overlooking the water. It was stunningly beautiful, but completely sterile. There was no clutter, no personal photos, nothing to suggest a life was actually lived there. It felt less like a home and more like a high-tech headquarters. I was given a suite of rooms that were larger than my entire old life, with a wall of glass that showed me the endless, churning gray sea. It felt like a cage, just a much prettier one. That first night, we didn't talk about feelings or the past. We sat in his minimalist office, a long table between us, and he laid out the battle plan. He spoke about stock prices, board members, and media strategies. The first step is the marriage, he said, his voice flat and all business. We'll do it in 3 days. A private ceremony at the city hall. No one will know until we are ready for them to know. And then what? I asked, my voice sounding small in the vast, quiet room. Then we announce it. Not through a press release. That's my mother's style. We'll do it our way. He slid a folder across the table. Inside was a profile of a journalist, a woman known for her aggressive, take no prisoners articles. You'll give her an exclusive interview. You will tell her everything. The lies, the surgery, the divorce papers in the hospital. You will be the sympathetic victim, the woman scorned by a powerful, ruthless family. Your story, combined with the shock of you marrying me, will create a firestorm. I felt a knot of ice form in my stomach. To lay my humiliation out for the entire world to see? To have strangers pick apart my pain, my stupidity? They'll tear me apart, I whispered. Let them, Caspian said, his eyes cold and hard. Their pity is a weapon. We will use it. While the world is focused on the human drama, I will be using the chaos to move against my mother on the board. Her reputation will be in tatters. Her allies will distance themselves. She'll be vulnerable for the first time in her life. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. And it required me to slice myself open and bleed for a global audience. The scar on my stomach seemed to throb in agreement. We were married on a Tuesday. I wore a simple white dress Caspian's assistant had bought for me. He wore a dark suit. We said our vows in front of a bored-looking city official. There were no flowers, no music, no loving glances. We signed the papers, 2 strangers binding our lives together for the sole purpose of destruction. When he slid a heavy, cold ring onto my finger, it felt like I was being branded. As we walked out of the building, he looked at me, his face unreadable. "Phase 1 is complete," he said, before leading me back to the car. The night after the wedding, I couldn't sleep. I stood in front of the glass wall in my room, watching the waves crash against the rocks below. The huge, empty house was silent. I felt a sudden, crushing wave of loneliness. I had a husband, but I had never been more alone. I wrapped my arms around myself, my fingers tracing the hard ridge of my scar through my thin nightgown. The physical pain was a dull ache now, but the emotional wound felt as fresh as the day it was inflicted. My breath hitched, and a sob escaped before I could stop it. "You should not be standing in the dark." I jumped, spinning around. Caspian was there, standing in the doorway of my room. I hadn't heard him approach. He was just a dark silhouette against the dim light of the hall. "I couldn't sleep," I said, my voice thick with tears I was trying to hold back. I felt exposed, weak. The last thing I wanted was for him to see me cry. He walked slowly into the room, stopping a few feet away from me. He didn't try to comfort me. He just watched me, his gaze intense. "The regret is setting in," he stated. It wasn't a question. "It's not regret," I snapped, wiping angrily at my eyes. "It's everything. It's hard." "I know what they did to you," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "I know what it costs to tell a story like that." He took a step closer. Before I could react, he reached out, his hand hovering just over my stomach, where he knew the scar was. His fingers didn't touch me, but I could feel the heat from them. "Does it still hurt?" he asked. The question was so simple, so direct. It broke through my defenses. "Every day," I whispered. A muscle in his jaw tightened. The coldness in his eyes flickered, replaced by a flash of something dark and violent. It was the same fury I felt, mirrored back at me. "Good," he said, his voice a low growl. "Remember that feeling. Use it. When you talk to that reporter, I want you to make them feel every bit of it." He dropped his hand and stepped back, the mask of indifference falling back into place. "Get some rest. The war begins tomorrow." He was right. The next morning, the interview was arranged. The journalist arrived at the house, her eyes sharp and hungry. For 2 hours, I sat across from her and told her my story. I didn't hold back. I talked about falling in love with Adrian, my desperation to please Elara, the hope I felt when I learned I was a donor match, and the crushing betrayal in that hospital room. I cried, but my tears weren't just from sadness. They were from rage. When I was done, the journalist was silent for a long moment, her expression unreadable. She just looked at me, then at Caspian, who had been sitting silently in the corner of the room the entire time. The story broke online 2 days later. It was worse and better than I could have imagined. My face was everywhere. The headline was brutal. "Billionaire's hero, ex-wife, left with scar and divorce papers after liver donation, marries his estranged brother." The article included pictures of me and Adrian in happier times, juxtaposed with a photo of the divorce filing. It even had an anonymous quote from a nurse at the hospital confirming the timeline. It was a masterpiece of character assassination. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Elara and Adrian were villains. I was a saint, a martyr. The comment sections were a sea of support for me and venom for them. Valerius pharma stock took a small but noticeable dip. Elara's response came that evening. It wasn't a public statement. It was a phone call directly to my new, unlisted number. My hands shook as I answered. "Chloe, darling." Her voice was smooth and laced with a manufactured sadness.
"I'm so sorry."
"I had no idea Adrian was going to do that to you. He broke my heart as much as he broke yours." I was speechless. The audacity of her lie was breathtaking. "And Caspian," she sighed, a perfect sound of maternal disappointment. "He has always been troubled. He has hated me since I had to make a difficult choice for the good of the company. He is poisoning you against us, my dear. He's using your pain to get at me. Don't let him. Come back to us. We can fix this. We are your family." The words were so practiced, so believable, that for a split second, a tiny sliver of doubt entered my mind. Was I just another pawn in a different game? But then I remembered the email. The asset is secured. The memory was a splash of cold water. You're a liar, I said, my voice cold and steady. There was a pause on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, the fake warmth was gone, replaced by a chilling venom. You ungrateful little girl. I gave you a life you could only dream of. You will regret this. You have no idea who you're dealing with. She hung up. The next day, the real counterattack began. A major news outlet ran a story painting Adrian as the heartbroken husband, forced to end his marriage because of my instability. It hinted at a history of emotional problems on my part. Then came the announcement that shattered what was left of my heart. Adrian Valerius was engaged to be married to Sofia Albescu, the daughter of a rival pharmaceutical giant. Their families were in talks to merge their companies. The engagement wasn't about love. It was a business deal, a power move, and the photos of them together, smiling and holding hands, were everywhere. She was everything I wasn't. Poised, elegant, from the right family. The perfect wife. The perfect asset. I looked at her picture, standing beside the man I once loved, and I felt nothing but a hollow emptiness. He hadn't just thrown me away. He had replaced me, upgraded me, as if I were an old phone. And the world was watching it happen. Caspin found me staring at the screen, my face pale. He looked at the picture of Adrian and Sophia, his expression unreadable. He didn't offer words of comfort. He simply placed a new file on the table in front of me. This is the prenuptial agreement Adrian's lawyer sent over this morning, he said. My head snapped up. I hadn't even thought about that. It's insulting. But they also included this. He tapped a second document. It was a cease and desist letter. It demanded I stop speaking about the Valerius family publicly, citing a non-disclosure agreement I had apparently signed as part of my divorce settlement. I stared at the paper, confused. I never signed an NDA. Caspian's eyes narrowed. They claim you did, and they have your signature on it. He turned his tablet around to show me a scanned copy of the document. And there it was. My name, signed in my own handwriting at the bottom of a page full of legal text. A page I had never seen before in my life. It was dated the day I was discharged from the hospital. I remembered signing a stack of discharge papers that day, a nurse holding the clipboard for me while I was still dizzy from the pain medication. I never read them. I just signed where she pointed. They had buried it in the paperwork. They had tricked me. I looked from the forged document to Caspian's grim face. Elara's threat echoed in my ears. You have no idea who you're dealing with. The game had changed. They weren't just trying to manage public opinion anymore. They were coming for me, legally. And they had a trap that I had walked into myself. A cold dread washed over me, colder than the ice in Caspian's eyes. They tricked me, I said, the words tasting like poison. My signature on that document was a brand, a legal chain yanking me back into silence. All the power I thought I'd gained, all the control I thought I was taking back, evaporated in an instant. I was right back where I started, helpless. This is what my mother does, Caspian said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. He took the tablet from me and looked at my forged signature, his jaw tight. She doesn't fight fair. She builds traps out of paperwork and politeness. She expected you to be too broken to notice. What do we do? I asked, my voice shaking. My entire strategy, our entire strategy, depended on my ability to speak out. Without my story, I was nothing. I was just the crazy ex-wife they were painting me as. We fight back, he said, the conviction in his voice so absolute it almost calmed me. He looked directly at me, and for the first time, the icy barrier in his eyes seemed to crack. I saw a flicker of something raw, something that looked almost like empathy. She did something similar to me. A clause buried in a trust document my father signed on his deathbed. A legal loophole she exploited to push me out of my own company. She uses love as a weapon and the law as her shield. But every shield has a weak point. He walked over to the massive window that overlooked the stormy sea. He stood there for a long moment, his back to me. When she forced me out, I spent the first year trying to destroy her. I leaked stories. I tried to turn board members against her. It was loud, messy, and it failed. It only made her look like a victim, a poor mother attacked by her ungrateful son. I learned a valuable lesson from that. He turned back to face me, his expression grim. You don't beat Elara Valerius by screaming louder. You beat her by being smarter. You find the one thing she cannot afford to lose, and you threaten to take it away quietly. His words resonated with the cold anger that was now my constant companion. He wasn't just my ally, he understood. He'd lived it. That shared experience, that shared enemy, felt like a bond stronger than any vow we'd spoken. In that moment, I trusted him completely. He was my weapon, my shield, my only way through this. We need to find her weak point, I said, my voice steadier now. A slow, dangerous smile touched his lips. I already have. And this NDA, this desperate, clumsy move, it just proves she's running scared. She's given us the opening we need. He looked at me, his gaze so intense it felt like he could see right into my soul. Get some sleep, Chloe. Tomorrow, I will show you how we turn their own trap against them. But sleep was impossible. My mind was a racetrack of fear and fury. I lay in the dark, the silk sheets of my new life feeling like a shroud. The house was silent, but it felt like it was humming with a nervous energy. After hours of staring at the ceiling, I got up. I needed to move. I needed to do something other than lie there and feel helpless. I wandered through the dark, empty corridors of Caspin's home. It was like a museum after hours. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and completely devoid of warmth. I found myself standing outside his office. The door was slightly ajar, a thin sliver of light cutting through the darkness. I knew I shouldn't go in. It was his space, his inner sanctum. But the need to feel in control, to see the battle plans for myself, was overwhelming. I pushed the door open. He wasn't there. He'd left a single lamp on, casting a pool of gold light on his massive, dark wood desk. The desk was neat, almost unnaturally so. A laptop, a single pen, and one slim, closed folder. My eyes were drawn to it. It felt wrong, a violation of the trust he had shown me. But the memory of my own signature on a document I'd never read pushed me forward. Trust had gotten me nothing but a scar and a broken heart. My hand trembled as I reached for the folder. I opened it. Inside were legal documents, drafts of some kind. The language was dense, full of clauses and subsections. I started to read, my heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The document was titled Proposed Separation Agreement and Transfer of Control. The parties involved were Caspian Valerius and Elara Valerius. I scanned the pages, my confusion growing. It was a deal. A very detailed, very specific deal. It outlined the terms under which Elara would step down as CEO of Valerius Pharma. She wouldn't be fired. She would retire, citing health reasons. She would retain a significant share of the company, and she would be given a severance package that was staggering in its size. It wasn't the destruction of her world. It was a golden parachute. My breath hitched. I kept reading, my eyes flying across the page, searching for the part that made sense, the part that included my justice. And then I found it. It was a clause near the end, under the heading Resolution of Ancillary Disputes. It stated that upon the execution of this agreement, all public statements regarding family matters would cease. It specifically mentioned me by name. A trust was to be established in my name. The amount made me feel sick. It was enough money to disappear, to live a life of quiet luxury anywhere in the world. The trust was contingent on two things: my signature on a permanent, unbreakable non-disclosure agreement, and my immediate and permanent relocation out of the country. The folder slipped from my fingers, scattering the pages across the dark, polished floor. I sank to my knees, the cold wood seeping through my nightgown. I wasn't his partner. I was his leverage. The whole thing, our entire alliance, was a lie. The marriage wasn't about creating a scandal to ruin her. It was about creating a problem that only he could solve. He had taken my pain, my public humiliation, and he had packaged it. He had turned my life's worst trauma into a bargaining chip. He was using me to negotiate a corporate takeover. He wasn't going to help me burn her world to the ground. He was going to use the threat of me to get what he wanted, and then he was going to pay me to disappear.
He was going to discard me, just like Adrian.
A wave of nausea so powerful it made the room tilt washed over me. The shared anger, the flicker of empathy, his story about his own betrayal. Was any of it real? Or was it just part of the performance? A carefully crafted script to ensure my compliance. The asset is secured, Elara had written. Caspian was just more sophisticated about it. He'd made me think I was a queen in his game of chess, when I was just another pawn he was willing to sacrifice. He had never wanted revenge for me. He only wanted the company. My justice was never part of the deal. My silence was. He had looked at my scar, asked if it hurt, and told me to use that pain. He wasn't trying to empower me. He was sharpening his favorite weapon. The thought made my skin crawl. He had stood there and listened to me pour out my heart to that reporter, knowing the entire time that he was going to sell my story for a seat at the head of a boardroom table. The kindness in the nurse's eyes. The fake warmth in Elara's voice. The cold calculation in Adrian's face. And now, the brilliant, ruthless deception in Caspian's plan. I was surrounded by liars, each one better than the last. I had escaped one trap only to walk straight into another one, this one more complex and more devastating than I could have ever imagined. I scrambled to pick up the papers, my hands shaking so badly I could barely gather them. I had to put them back. He couldn't know that I knew. If he knew, I would lose the only advantage I had left, the element of surprise. He thought I was a broken, grateful victim, completely dependent on him. He saw me as a simple girl, just as his mother had. They all underestimated me, and that was the only weapon I had left. I placed the folder back on the desk, exactly where I found it. I backed out of the room, pulling the door gently until it was just a crack, just as it had been before. I crept back to my room, my heart a block of ice in my chest. The feeling of betrayal was so profound it was a physical ache, deeper and sharper than my surgical scar. I stood in front of the window again, looking out at the dark, angry sea. The loneliness I had felt earlier was nothing compared to this. This was an isolation so complete it felt like I was the only person left on Earth. I had no one, no family to turn to, no friends who could understand, and the man I had married, my only ally, was my greatest enemy. He was going to trade my pain for power, and I was supposed to take the money and walk away quietly. They were all the same. The Valerius men just had different methods of getting what they wanted. Adrian used false promises of love. Caspian used false promises of revenge. Both of them saw me as something to be bought, used, and silenced. But they were wrong. I wasn't for sale. My pain was not a commodity. My story was not a bargaining chip. And my revenge would be my own. A terrifying calm settled over me. The tears were gone. The fear was gone. All that remained was a single, pure, and unshakable purpose. I wasn't just fighting Elara and Adrian anymore. I was fighting all of them. And this time, I wouldn't be anyone's asset. I would be the one holding the board. The war wasn't over. It had just begun. The next morning, I walked on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. I showered, dressed, and put on the face of a woman who had slept soundly. The mask felt brittle, like it might crack if I blinked too hard. Every nerve in my body was screaming. He was a liar. He was just like them. The knowledge was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. I found him in the dining area, a vast space with another wall of glass overlooking the sea. He was sitting at the head of a long, dark table, a tablet in front of him, a cup of black coffee at his side. He didn't look up when I entered, but I knew he was aware of me. The air itself seemed to vibrate with his presence. "Good morning," he said, his eyes still on the screen. "I trust you slept well." Like a rock, I lied. The words tasted like ash. I sat down at the opposite end of the long table. The distance between us felt like a mile. He finally looked up and his gaze was sharp, analytical. He was studying me, looking for cracks. I forced my hands to stay steady on the table. "I have our countermove," he said, his voice clipped and efficient. "The NDA they tricked you into signing is flimsy. We can argue it was signed under duress, while you were medicated. It will be a messy, public fight. Or we can do something cleaner." He paused, watching for my reaction. I just nodded, my throat too tight to speak. "My mother's greatest weakness is her desire for control," he continued, "and her fear of losing the company. I am going to make her an offer. A proposal to end this war before it truly begins." Here it comes, I thought. The sanitized version of his betrayal. "I will propose a settlement," he said. "I will use the threat of our marriage and your story as leverage to force her into a deal. In exchange for her stepping down as CEO and transferring control of her voting shares, we will agree to silence." Silence. I echoed, the word feeling foul in my mouth. "A permanent, binding non-disclosure agreement. For everyone," he said smoothly. "It's the only way to guarantee she can't come after you again. It protects you. As part of this deal, I will establish a trust in your name. A significant one. It will ensure your financial independence for the rest of your life. You will be free of them, and me, forever. You can go anywhere, do anything. You will never have to worry about money again." He framed it as a victory. A perfect, clean escape. But I saw it for what it was. My payoff. The price for my silence so he could get his company. The disgust was so strong I could taste it. He was offering me a golden cage, just like the one he'd accused his mother of building. I had to play my part. I had to pretend this was what I wanted. "So, I take the money, and it all just goes away?" I asked, trying to sound hopeful, naive. The way he expected me to sound. "Precisely," he said, a faint hint of satisfaction in his voice. He thought I was buying it. "It is the most logical path forward. A clean cut. It gives you the security you deserve, and me the control I require." "The control you require," I repeated softly. It was a slip. I hadn't meant to say it out loud. The words were too pointed, too knowing. His eyes narrowed. The air in the room instantly grew cold. He had caught it. The slight shift in my tone, the tiny crack in my mask. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze pinning me to my chair. "Is there a problem, Chloe?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. My heart was hammering. It was too late to go back. The performance was over. I had two choices: cower and accept his deal, or face him. The thought of taking their money, of being paid to forget what they did to me, made me feel sick. My rage, cold and pure, finally boiled over. "I saw the folder in your office last night," I said. My voice didn't shake. It was as cold and hard as the block of ice in my chest. "The one with the proposed separation agreement. I know the deal isn't about protecting me, Caspian. It's about you getting Valerius Pharma. I'm just the leverage you're cashing in to close the deal." Silence. A thick, heavy silence stretched between us. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look guilty. He just looked impressed. A slow, cold smile touched his lips, but it held no warmth. It was the smile of a predator who realized its prey was smarter than it looked. "I underestimated you," he said, his voice losing all its manufactured warmth. It was flat, hard steel. "I should have known my mother's taste for manipulation might have rubbed off on her opponents." "Don't compare me to her," I snarled. "No," he conceded, leaning back in his chair. The mask was completely gone now. This was the real Caspian Valerius, the ruthless CEO, the man who would do anything to win. She would have cried. "You get angry. It's far more interesting." He steepled his fingers, his expression unreadable. "So you know the plan. My real plan. It doesn't change anything. The offer stands. It's a better deal than you would get anywhere else." "A deal?" I almost laughed. The sound was harsh and broken. "You lied to me. You promised me revenge. You promised we would burn her world to the ground." "Revenge is a child's fantasy," he said dismissively. "Power is reality. I am offering you a new reality, one without pain or struggle. You sign the papers, you take the money, and you disappear. This is your only winning move. My winning move is to let you all get away with it, to let you buy my story and sell it for profit. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Adrian took a piece of my body and paid me for it. Now you want to take a piece of my soul and do the same thing. You are exactly like him. The insult hit its mark. For the first time, a flicker of raw emotion crossed his face. A flash of dark, violent anger. His jaw clenched. "Do not ever," he said, his voice a low, threatening growl, "compare me to my brother. He is a weak, sentimental fool who let his mother control him. I control everything." He stood up, a towering, intimidating figure of wealth and power. "This is not a negotiation, Chloe. It is a statement of fact. You have two options. Option 1. You accept my very generous offer. You live the rest of your life in comfort and obscurity. This entire nightmare becomes a distant memory." He took a step towards me, moving around the long table. Option 2, you refuse. You walk out of here with nothing. I will release a statement saying our marriage was a mistake, a product of your emotional instability following your divorce. I will support my family's narrative. I will bury you in legal fees fighting the NDA you absolutely will not win against. You will be alone, penniless, and seen by the entire world as a liar. You will have no credibility, no support, no hope. You will be a nobody again. Only this time, you will be a nobody that everyone has heard of.
So you tell me,
which is the logical choice. His words were like stones, each one hitting me with a brutal, undeniable force. He had thought of everything. He had backed me into a corner with no escape. Every option led to disaster. My own disaster. He would win either way. He would either get the company quietly, or he would publicly crush me and consolidate his power within the family by showing his loyalty. My whole body trembled, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from a rage, so profound it felt like it was the only thing holding me together.
He thought he could break me.
He thought he could buy me. He thought my silence had a price tag. I looked him straight in the eye. I choose option 3. He raised an eyebrow. There is no option 3. There is now, I said, my voice ringing with a conviction I didn't know I had. I keep my story. I keep my name. And I don't take a single cent of your blood money. You can have your company. You and your mother and your brother can fight over the scraps of your miserable empire. But you don't get to own this. You don't get to own what you did to me. He stared at me for a long moment, his face a mask of cold fury. He saw that I was serious. He saw that I was unbreakable in the one way that mattered to him. I was an asset he could not liquidate. "You are a fool," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You are choosing to suffer out of pride. It's pathetic." "No," I said, a bitter smile touching my lips. "I'm choosing to be free. Something you'll never be." He didn't say another word. He just turned, walked over to an intercom on the wall, and pressed a button. "Security. Escort Mrs. Valerius from the premises. She is not to return." 2 large men in dark suits entered the room almost immediately. They didn't touch me, but they flanked me, their presence a silent, overwhelming threat. They were waiting to remove me, like a piece of trash. I looked at Caspin one last time. He had already turned his back on me, looking out at the stormy sea as if I were no longer there. I had been dismissed. The transaction was over. The security guards walked me to the front door. One of them held it open. As I stepped out into the cold, damp air, the other one spoke, his voice polite but firm. "Your personal effects will be sent to a charity of Mr. Valerius's choosing." They were even taking the few cheap clothes I had arrived with. I was being erased completely. I walked down the long, winding driveway, the wind whipping my hair across my face. I didn't look back. When I reached the massive iron gates, they slid shut behind me with a heavy, final sound. I was outside the fortress, alone, with nothing but the clothes on my back and the scar on my stomach. I looked at my phone. My bank app wouldn't open. My accounts were frozen. He had already done it. I was destitute. I stood on the side of a deserted coastal road with nowhere to go and no one to call. The despair I had been holding back finally crashed over me in a massive, suffocating wave. I had lost. I had lost everything. Again. And this time, I had no hope of getting it back. I was completely and utterly broken. I stood there on the side of the road as the gates of Caspin's fortress clicked shut, the sound echoing the final closing of a door on my life. The wind was cold. It cut through the thin material of my dress, a dress I didn't even own, and raised goosebumps on my arms. I had nothing. Less than nothing. When Adrian left me, I had a scar and a check. Now, I had 2 scars, one on my body and one on my trust, and not a single dollar to my name. The despair was a physical thing. It felt like the gray, churning sea below the cliff, pulling me down, wanting to swallow me whole. My legs started to move before my brain did, one foot in front of the other, walking down the long, empty road. I didn't know where I was going. There was nowhere to go. My phone was a useless brick in my pocket. My credit cards were plastic rectangles. My husband, the man who had promised to help me get revenge, had just ordered his guards to throw me out like trash. Every car that passed felt like an accusation. The people inside, warm and safe, heading towards their lives, their homes. I was just a ghost on the side of the road. I walked for hours. The sun began to set, painting the sky in colors that seemed to mock the black and white of my world. My feet ached. The dull throb from my surgical scar flared up, a constant reminder of my first, catastrophic mistake. I ended up in a small town I didn't recognize. I found a small park with a bench, and I collapsed onto it. I couldn't walk anymore. I couldn't think anymore. The full weight of my situation finally crushed me. I was alone, penniless, and my name was about to be dragged through the mud by 2 of the most powerful families in the country. Caspin would make sure of it. He would paint me as unstable, a liar, to protect his family and his deal. And people would believe him. Why wouldn't they? He had the money, the power, the platform. I had nothing. Pride was a poor substitute for food and shelter. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was a fool. I buried my face in my hands, and a dry, ragged sob tore through me. It was over. They had won. All of them. Elara, Adrian, Caspin. They had taken everything, and I had let them. And then a memory surfaced. A small, simple act of kindness in a world that had shown me nothing but cruelty. A nurse in the hospital, her name was Maria. She had looked at me with real sympathy, not pity. She had called me honey, and her eyes had been kind when she saw the divorce papers. She had been angry for me when she saw the insulting check Adrian had left. She was real. It was a stupid, desperate thought. A total long shot. I didn't have her number. I didn't even know her last name. But I remembered the name of the hospital. It was a single thread in a torn-up sweater, but it was the only thread I had. The thought gave me a surge of adrenaline. It was better than sitting here and dying. I pushed myself off the bench and started walking again, this time with a destination. I asked a woman walking her dog for directions to the nearest public library. It was another 2 miles away. The library was warm and quiet. I found a phone book, the pages thin and worn. My hands shook as I looked up the number for the hospital. I walked over to the public phones, my heart pounding. I didn't even have a quarter. I had to make a collect call. The operator sounded bored. Who may I say is calling? Chloe. Valerius, I said, the name tasting like poison. I was put on hold. The tinny music felt like a countdown to another failure. I was transferred from the main desk to the surgical recovery wing. A woman answered. I'm trying to reach a nurse, I said, my voice cracking. Her name is Maria. I don't know her last name. She has dark, curly hair and a daughter. We have a few Marias, the woman said, her voice tired. I can't just connect you. Please, I begged, tears welling up in my eyes. It's an emergency. I was a patient of hers. Chloe Brown. There was a long pause. I thought she had hung up. Hold on, she said finally. I waited for what felt like an eternity. And then a different voice came on the line. A voice I recognized. "Chloe? Is that you? What's wrong?" The sound of her voice, the genuine concern in it, broke me. The story tumbled out, a messy, incoherent confession of what had happened with Caspin, of being thrown out with nothing. I left out the billionaire parts. I just said my new husband had thrown me out and I had nowhere to go. Maria didn't ask questions. She didn't judge. She just said, "Okay, honey.
Okay.
Don't you move." "Where are you?" I told her the address of the library. "My shift ends in an hour. Take the number 12 bus heading east. Get off at the corner of Oak and 5th. There's a diner there. Go inside and wait for me. Tell them Maria sent you. They'll give you some coffee." "I don't have any money," I whispered, ashamed. "Don't you worry about that," she said, her voice firm and warm. "I'll be there soon. Just hang on." An hour later, I was sitting in a booth in the corner of a cozy diner, a steaming mug of coffee in front of me. The waitress had just smiled when I said Maria's name and told me to sit wherever I wanted. Maria walked in looking tired, but her smile was immediate when she saw me. She slid into the booth opposite me and took my hands in hers. Her hands were warm and strong. "Okay," she said. "Let's figure this out." That night, I slept in the spare room in Maria's small, clean apartment. It was filled with her daughter's old toys and smelled faintly of laundry soap. It felt safer and more real than Caspian's glass fortress or the perfectly decorated guest house at Elara's estate. Maria gave me a set of pajamas to wear and a bowl of soup that warmed me from the inside out. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, I was being cared for by someone who wanted nothing from me. I stayed there for 3 days, mostly sleeping. My body and spirit were completely exhausted. Maria would leave for work before I woke up and come home long after dark, but she always left food for me. On the 4th day, I finally felt human again. I was sitting at her small kitchen table when she came home. "You look better," she said, putting down her bag. "I don't know how to thank you," I said, my voice thick. "You don't have to," she said, sitting down across from me. She looked me straight in the eye. "Now, what are you going to do? You can't hide here forever." "I don't know," I admitted. "He took everything. They're going to say I'm a liar. No one will ever hire me." "So let them," she said, her voice fierce. "Let them say whatever they want. Does that make it true? They took a piece of your liver, Chloe. They took your husband. They took your money. Don't you dare let them take your fight, too. That's the only thing you have left that's all yours." Her words hit me harder than any of Caspin's threats. She was right. I had been so focused on what they had taken, I forgot what I still had. I had my mind. I had my story. And I had a fire inside me that they hadn't been able to put out. I had been a victim for long enough. I looked at Maria, this woman who barely knew me but who had shown me more grace than my own family, and I made a choice. I would not stay broken. I would not hide in shame. I would stand in my truth. "Okay," I said, a new strength in my voice. "But I need a job. I need to start over. From scratch." A smile touched her lips. "I might know a place. My sister, she manages a high-end consignment shop downtown. They get a lot of estate sales stuff. Furniture, jewelry, sometimes art. They're always looking for people who know their stuff." Before I married Adrian, I was studying art history. It was my passion. I loved the stories behind the paintings, the lives of the artists. I thought that part of me was gone forever, just another piece of the old Chloe that had been erased. The next day, Maria lent me a simple black dress, and I went to the shop. It was a beautiful place, filled with forgotten treasures. Maria's sister, a woman named Lena, was sharp and professional. She looked at me, at my cheap, borrowed clothes, and I could see the doubt in her eyes. "My sister says you know about art," she said, her tone skeptical. "I do," I said. She led me to a painting hanging on the back wall. It was a small landscape, dark and moody. "Some guy brought this in. Says it's from the 19th century. Worth a lot. What do you think?" I looked at the painting. I really looked at it. I saw the brushstrokes, the way the light was captured, the signature in the corner almost hidden in shadow. And something inside me, a part of me I thought was dead, woke up. I talked about the artist, about the period he painted in, about the specific type of canvas he used. I pointed out why the signature looked wrong, why the colors were too bright for the age it was supposed to be. I told her it was a very good copy, but a copy nonetheless. When I finished, Lena was silent, just staring at me. The skepticism was gone, replaced by a look of respect.
"You're hired," she said.
"You can start tomorrow." I walked out of that shop and into the bright afternoon sun, feeling a sense of hope so powerful it almost brought me to my knees. That evening, Maria and I celebrated with a cheap bottle of wine. I had a job. I had a purpose. I had a future that had nothing to do with the Valerius family. A week later, I got my first paycheck. I held the check in my hand, looking at the small, hard-earned number. It was less than the cost of a single pair of shoes Caspin's assistant had bought for me. But it was the most valuable thing I had ever owned, because it was mine. I had earned it with my own skill, my own knowledge. I hadn't been defeated. I had been liberated. They had stripped me of everything they had given me, but in doing so, they had given me back the one person I had lost along the way, myself. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had changed. I wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. I was fighting for me, and I was just getting started. 6 months. It felt like a lifetime. In 6 months, I had gone from being a ghost on the side of a road to being Chloe Brown again. I had my own tiny apartment above a flower shop that always smelled of fresh earth. I had my own paycheck, my own set of keys, my own life. It wasn't a life of luxury. It was a life I had built with my own 2 hands, piece by piece, and it was more valuable to me than anything the Valerius family had ever given me. I was now the head of appraisals at Lena's shop. I spent my days surrounded by the stories of other people's lives, a beautiful clutter of art and furniture and forgotten jewelry. I found a rhythm there. I found a purpose. The dull ache in my abdomen was just a part of me now, a quiet reminder of a debt that had been paid in full. I was healing. Then I saw it. An invitation, printed on thick, expensive cardstock, sitting on Lena's desk. The Valerius and Albescu families requested the pleasure of her company at a gala celebrating the engagement of Adrian Valerius and Sophia Albescu. The event was being held at the city's main art museum. It was more than a party. It was the public coronation of their new corporate dynasty. "You should go," Lena said, watching me read it. "You're my lead appraiser. It's a good networking opportunity." She knew my whole story. She had been my quiet, steady supporter from the beginning. I looked at the invitation, at their names entwined in elegant script. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach, but it wasn't despair. It was resolve. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "I think I will." The plan formed in my mind over the next few weeks, sharp and clear. It was a risky, terrifying plan that relied on one single, unbelievable piece of luck that had fallen into my lap 2 months ago. A law firm, handling the estate of a recently deceased wealthy woman, had contacted our shop to appraise her art collection. In her files, I found a series of letters and receipts. They detailed her private sale of 3 paintings to Elara Valerius over a decade ago. The paintings were minor works by famous artists. But the real discovery was a certified report from a renowned art expert, dated a year after the sale. The woman had become suspicious of the dealer who brokered the sale and had hired someone to investigate. The report concluded that the paintings were brilliant, almost undetectable forgeries. There was no proof, she ever told Elara. She probably died not knowing for sure if the woman who bought them was a co-conspirator or just another fool. I knew which one Elara was. A woman who gave her daughter-in-law a copy of a family heirloom. A woman whose entire life was a performance. I showed my findings to Lena. She made a few quiet phone calls, using her own contacts to re-verify the old report. The conclusion was the same. 3 of the most talked-about pieces in Elara's private collection were fake, and 2 of them were currently on loan to the museum, part of a special exhibit for the gala. The night of the party, I stood in front of the mirror in my small apartment. I wore a simple dark dress I'd bought on sale. My hair was styled in a way that felt like my own. I wasn't wearing a single piece of jewelry. I looked like myself. Stronger. Harder, maybe.
But me.
Maria was there, sitting on my bed. She was wearing her best dress, looking nervous but determined. "Are you sure about this, Chloe?" she asked for the 10th time. "I'm sure," I said, turning to face her. They built their world on lies. "I'm just going to hold up a mirror." We took a taxi to the museum. Walking up the grand stone steps, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The moment I stepped through those doors, there was no turning back. I handed the security guard my invitation, my hand not shaking at all. The Great Hall was filled with the most powerful people in the city. The air hummed with quiet conversation and the clinking of glasses. And I saw them. Elara was the queen of the room, radiant in a gown that shimmered under the chandeliers. Adrian was beside her, his arm around Sophia. He looked handsome, happy, and completely hollow. Then my eyes found Caspin. He was standing alone, near the edge of the crowd, watching the scene with an unreadable expression. He looked bored and dangerous, like a panther in a cage full of chattering birds. Our eyes met across the room. His expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something.
Surprise.
He hadn't expected to see me here. He had expected me to be a broken, forgotten memory. I held his gaze for a long moment before turning away. I wasn't here for him. I let them see me. I moved through the room, accepting a glass of water from a server. I could feel their eyes on me. I heard the whispers start. People recognized me from the news stories. I saw Elara's smile tighten when she saw me. I saw Adrian's face go pale. They thought I was here to make a scene, to cry or scream. They thought I was the unstable victim they had created. I waited until the toasts began. Adrian's future father-in-law spoke, talking about the strength of their new union. Then Adrian took the microphone. He spoke about new beginnings, about finding true love. He never once looked in my direction. When he finished, Elara stepped up to the microphone, her smile wide and gracious. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate this joyous union," she began. "Family is everything. It is the foundation upon which we build our lives, our legacies." This was my moment. I walked toward the small stage. Not quickly, not aggressively. I just walked. A path cleared for me as people stepped back, their eyes wide with anticipation. Security started to move, but I was already there. I stopped just below the stage, looking up at Elara. Her smile had vanished, replaced by a mask of cold fury. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, her voice low so only I could hear. I spoke, my voice clear and calm, and it carried through the suddenly silent hall. "I just wanted to offer my own congratulations, Elara." I turned my head to look at Adrian. "You've found a new beginning, Adrian. I hope this one is built on something more real than your last one." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. Sophia looked confused, her hand tightening on his arm. I turned back to Elara. "You spoke of legacy. It's something you value a great deal, isn't it? Just like your art collection." My eyes drifted to the far wall, where two of the forged paintings were hanging under soft lights. "You have such an eye for beauty. But it's a shame when things aren't what they appear to be, isn't it?" A murmur went through the crowd. Elara's face was like stone. "Security, remove this woman. She's trespassing." "Am I?" I asked, holding up my invitation. "I came to admire the art, like your prized Moreau. It's a brilliant copy, isn't it? Almost as good as the silver bracelet you gave me for our anniversary. You seem to have a taste for impressive fakes, Elara. Things that look real, but have no actual value." Her composure finally broke. "That is a disgusting lie." "Is it?" I said, my voice ringing with confidence. "I have the original report from the previous owner's estate, authenticated by two of the top experts in the field. The paintings are forgeries. Your legacy, the collection you built your reputation on, is based on a lie, just like everything else in your life." The room erupted in loud whispers. People were looking at the paintings, then back at Elara, her perfect world crumbling around her in real time. "She's delirious," Elara shouted into the microphone, her voice shrill. "She's mentally unstable. She signed a non-disclosure agreement, and she is in violation of it." "The agreement?" I asked, a cold smile on my face. You mean the one your lawyers buried in a stack of hospital discharge papers? The one you had me sign when I was barely conscious after giving you a piece of my liver? I scanned the crowd, and my eyes found Maria. I nodded. She stepped forward. My name is Maria Sanchez, she said, her voice strong and steady. I was Chloe's nurse. I was there when she signed those papers. She was heavily medicated and in no condition to sign a legal document. She was told they were for her medical release. That is the truth. It was a fatal blow, a credible witness, a woman with nothing to gain. The room was in chaos. Journalists were pushing forward, their phones held up, recording everything. Elara stood on the stage, her face a mask of utter horror. She had been publicly, surgically dismantled. Her reputation as a connoisseur was destroyed. Her credibility was in ashes. Adrian looked like he was going to be sick. I had done it. I had told my truth. I hadn't screamed or cried. I had used my knowledge, my work, the very thing I had rebuilt my life on, to expose her. My eyes found Caspin one last time. He stood in the same spot, unmoved by the chaos. His face was a thundercloud of fury. His quiet, clean corporate takeover was now a messy, public scandal. I had ruined everything for him, but as I looked into his cold, furious eyes, I saw something else there too. A flicker of something that looked terrifyingly like admiration. He had created a monster to use as leverage, and that monster had just burned the whole building down on her own terms. I turned my back on all of them, on the whispers, on the flashing cameras, on the wreckage of their lives. I walked out of that museum, leaving the noise and the lies behind me. I stepped out into the cool night air, took a deep breath, and for the first time in 2 years, I felt completely and totally free. I didn't run. I walked, each step deliberate, away from the grand building and into the quiet of the night. The sound of sirens started in the distance, growing closer, a fitting soundtrack for the bomb I had just detonated. I didn't look back to see the flashing lights descend on the museum. I just kept walking, pulling the cool air into my lungs. It felt like the first real breath I had taken in 2 years. I wasn't running from anything anymore. I was walking toward myself. My phone buzzed in my small clutch purse. It was Lena. Are you okay? Where are you? I'm fine, I said, and the words were true. I'm on my way home. Another car pulled up beside me. A sleek, dark car I recognized. The back window lowered, and Caspin looked out at me. His face was unreadable in the dim light, but the fury was gone, replaced by something I couldn't decipher. Get in, Chloe, he said. It wasn't an order. It was a request. I stopped walking and looked at him. Why? Because you just destroyed my mother, my brother, my company's stock value, and my entire plan in one 5-minute speech, he said, his voice flat. The least you can do is let me drive you home. I thought about it for a second. I should have said no. I should have kept walking. But my curiosity won. I wanted to see what the most powerful man I knew looked like when he had lost all control. I opened the door and got in. The car was silent as it pulled away from the curb. We drove through the city, the streetlights sliding over his face. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking straight ahead. My deal is dead, obviously, he said finally. The Albesca family is already preparing a statement to distance themselves. Sophia will break the engagement by morning. The museum has sealed the exhibit and announced a full investigation. My mother has been escorted to her car, refusing to speak to the press. She is ruined. He recited the facts like a news report. Is that what you wanted? I asked quietly. He turned his head and looked at me, his eyes searching my face. It's what she deserved, he said. Your way was better. Messier, more public, but undeniably more thorough. You didn't just take her power. You took her pride. I never thought of that. Revenge is a child's fantasy. I quoted his own words back to him. A small, humorless smile touched his lips. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps it's an art form. And you, Chloe, are a master. He fell silent again for a few blocks. When he spoke next, his voice was different.
Softer.
I am sorry. For lying to you. For trying to use you. for underestimating you. That was my biggest mistake." The apology was simple, direct, and completely unexpected. It disarmed me. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because for the first time in my life," he said, turning to face me fully, "I have absolutely no idea what to do next. And I find the feeling interesting." When the car pulled up outside my little apartment building above the flower shop, he got out and walked me to the door. "What will you do now?" he asked. "I'm going to go to work tomorrow," I said. "I'm going to keep building my life." He just nodded. "Chloe," he said, his hand hovering near my arm but not touching it, "if you ever need anything—" "I won't," I said, not unkindly. "But thank you." I went inside, locked the door, and leaned against it, my heart finally letting go of the tight knot I had been holding. It was truly, finally over. The next year was a blur of hard work and quiet joy. The Valerius scandal was the biggest story in the country for weeks. Elara disappeared from public life completely. The board of Valerius Pharma forced her to step down, and she faced multiple lawsuits from art collectors and museums. Adrian, humiliated and abandoned by Sophia, faded into obscurity. My life, on the other hand, began to bloom. The world now knew my name, not as a victim, but as the woman who had exposed the Valerius family with nothing but the truth and her own expertise. My reputation as an art appraiser with an unshakable integrity skyrocketed. Offers poured in. 6 months after the gala, with a small business loan and Lena as my partner, I opened my own firm, Brown and Associates. We specialized in authenticating private collections. We were small, but we were trusted. I was finally financially secure on my own terms. Caspian did not disappear. After the scandal, he managed to pick up the pieces of his family's company. With Elara gone, he was voted in as the new CEO. He was even more ruthless and brilliant as a leader than he had been as an enemy. He rebuilt Valerius Pharma, rebranded it, and made it more successful than ever. He would call me once every few weeks. The calls were brief. He'd ask about my business. I'd ask about his. There was no talk of the past, no talk of romance. It was just a connection. A strange, quiet friendship built on the ashes of a war. One evening, about a year after the gala, there was a knock on my apartment door. It was him. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit. He was in simple dark pants and a sweater. He looked tired. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside and let him into my small, cluttered living room. It was filled with books and art prints and a comfortable, slightly worn sofa. It was a home. He looked around, a small, genuine smile on his face. "It looks like you," he said. He handed me a simple, unadorned box. "This is for you." I opened it. Inside was a silver bracelet. It was simple, elegant, and heavy. It wasn't the copy Elara had given me. It was the real Valerius family heirloom. "My mother's assets were liquidated to settle her lawsuits," he explained. "I bought this at auction. I thought its story should have a different ending." "I can't accept this," I said, trying to hand it back. "Please," he said, his voice quiet. "Think of it as war reparations. Or better yet, think of it as a new beginning." He looked me in the eye, and for the first time, I saw no ice, no calculation. I just saw a man, vulnerable and sincere. "I spent my whole life fighting my mother for control of a company. You fought her for control of your own soul. You won the more important battle." He took a small step closer. "I've spent the last year rebuilding my empire. But it's empty, Chloe. Because the only person I want to share it with, the only person I see as my equal, thinks I'm a monster." "I don't think you're a monster, Caspian," I whispered. "Good," he said, a wave of relief washing over his face. He reached out and took my hand, his grip warm and steady. "Then let me start over. The right way this time. No deals, no plans. Just you and me." He got down on one knee, right there in my little living room, and he held up the antique box. He took the bracelet out and set it aside. The velvet lining of the box had been refitted to hold a simple, beautiful ring. "Chloe Brown," he said, his voice shaking just slightly. You are the strongest, bravest, most brilliant woman I have ever met. You saved yourself, and in the process, you showed me what's actually worth fighting for. Marry me. Not for revenge, not for business. Marry me because my world makes no sense without you in it. Tears streamed down my face, but they were happy tears. Tears of release, of a future I never thought possible. I had started this journey trying to earn a place in a family that didn't want me. And now, here was a man offering to build a new family, one based not on lies or obligation, but on respect and a shared strength. I looked at him, at the hope in his eyes, and I knew I was finally home. I had my revenge. I had my career. I had my peace. And now I had love. The real kind. The kind you fight for. Yes, I whispered. Yes. And that's my story. It's been a crazy ride, hasn't it? From a hospital bed to a boardroom war to this, right here.
Peace.
It's amazing what you can survive when you refuse to let someone else write your ending. Thank you guys so much for listening and for being here with me today. It means the world to me. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and maybe share it with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. Let me know in the comments what you thought about Elara's downfall. Was it satisfying enough? I read all your comments, and I love hearing from you. I'll be back next week with a brand new story that's just as wild. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you then.